Okay, I know some people are sick and tired of discussing settlement building in Fallout 4. I mean, I'm certainly not, I love it, but I get it. Not everyone buys their open world RPG with first/third person shooter mechanics with the intention of spending 20 plus hours converting the ruins of an old gas station into a medieval castle with a soda fountain, basketball courts, blackjack, and hookers. Maybe you just want to rent a bed in a community that's already well established, or better yet, buy a home that already exists. Well, not all towns, cities, or otherwise dirty word incoming settlements are created equal. Some just have inherent advantages over others: better shelter, more access to food, location in a safer part of the map, and more. So which city is the definitive best in Fallout 4, and which one just needs a nuke and a do-over? If you're interested in finding out, grab a hammer and start pounding on a perfectly good wall while I, Gray of Gray Gaming, rank every permanent settlement in Fallout 4. So if I don't explicitly state this, I know I'm going to get slammed in the comments about being arbitrary and subjective. I mean, you're watching a ranking video about stuff you find in a video game. You're sort of participating in an exercise in arbitrary decision making here. But here goes, an objective-ish ranking system. I will be ranking settlements on 5 key categories: survival needs, food, water, shelter, stuff like that; security controls, industrial capacity, aka crafting stations; commercial capacity, vis-a-vis the number and type of stores available; and finally additional amenities. This is sort of a wildcard last-minute point booster if they offer something unique that substantiates a noticeable improvement in quality of life. Survival will be worth 3 points total, given in half-point increments, half for the people that are already living there and half for the sole survivor if they decide to move in. Security will be worth 2 points, 1 for active controls and 1 for passive controls. Active controls are things like guards, turrets, and other defenses that actively deal with attackers. Passive controls are things that, once there, just do their jobs: walls, gates, traps, natural barriers, things like that. For industry, there are 5 types of crafting stations, so I'll give 1 point for each type of crafting station and an additional half point if there are duplicates of a given station, assuming that 1 of each type exists. Now technically there is a 6th crafting station, but since no settlements have a Nuka-Cola mixer, I might as well just exclude it from this ranking system. For commercial enterprises, there are 6 types of store. Each one will be worth 1 point, unless it is in the form of a traveling merchant, and will only be worth half a point as they won't always be available when you need them. And lastly, for additional amenities, this will be worth a maximum of 2 points doled out in half-point increments. This leaves a total Gray's Would I Live There score of 18, with some extra credit opportunities mixed in. Oh, and for the first time ever for one of these types of videos, no spoilers. I know, I'm shocked myself. Nuketown, USA was probably the hardest settlement on this list, mostly because I couldn't decide which sections of the park to include, so it'll be all downhill from here, he says 2 sentences into the ranking like he has the slightest idea how this is going to turn out. Although the majority of the civilian population occupies the Nuketown market, there are settlers occupying most major sections of the park, so I'll just include the entire Nuketown, USA region. Oh, and yeah, my settlers got that weird bug where their clothes unequipped along with their bomb collars, and I was too lazy to fix it with console commands, so be prepared for some PG-13 3D animated nudity. So starting with survival needs, for shelter, I am extremely confused because the majority of settlers who occupy the Nuketown market operate their shops 24 hours a day. They never sleep, they just sit in their slightly shaded trading booths, and as far as I can remember, I've never seen any of them anywhere in Nuketown stop to go to bed anywhere. I can't find any evidence to suggest that these people have homes of their own, other than a couple mattresses and sleeping bags strewn about on the ground, which is definitely not universal to all shopkeepers, so they aren't going to get any points for shelter here. The sole survivor has a bed, but it's on an exposed balcony, so it offers little protection from the elements. One survival need that is very obviously missing is crops. There is not a single food crop plant anywhere in Nuketown, USA. There's a pen for Brahmalups, but these are pack animals, not meat herds. So the only in-universe explanation is that this settlement is completely dependent on food imports from elsewhere in the wasteland. No point for food, and there's no source of clean water either. You would think that with the boat pond that this would be the perfect place for a purifier setup, but nope, there does not seem to be any ready source of clean water. Once again, making them completely dependent on imports if they don't want to drink the dirty irradiated stuff. So for basic survival needs, Nuketown is an absolute shambles with 0 points. Security Security, on the other hand, is a different story. The entirety of Nuka Town, USA is surrounded by a wall, and a pretty robust and heavy-duty wall at that, with 3 main points of ingress and egress, one entrance in the south near the market, one in the north near Fishtop Mountain, and a third behind the Kolokars Arena, allowing settlers to create choke points in the event of an attack. However, these gates are pretty large and would require several settlers to defend each one. If their population were to expand, this wouldn't be as much of an issue, but for now it would be difficult to cover all points of attack. However, there is sort of an Alamo, a last point of retreat in the form of the market itself, which itself is walled off from the rest of the park and accessible from one of 2 doors, and given the much tighter confines of the market would be more easily defended by a smaller number of people. So they'll get the point for passive security, but excluding the raiders for spoiler-free reasons, Nuka World does not possess a professional security force, and they don't utilize turrets or other means of actively defending Nuka Town, so they won't get the point for active security measures. Industrial capacity is where Nuka Town really shines. The Nuka World Market contains an armor repair station, a weapons workbench, and a chemistry station. Hidden away in the repair shop behind the Kolokars Arena is a second armor station. In an alleyway connecting the Kolokars courtyard to the main drag is a second weapons workstation. Inside the cafe is a cook stove. Inside the Nuka-cade is a third weapons workbench. Inside the parlor is a second cook stove and chemistry station, and a third and fourth armor and weapons workbench respectively. Littered throughout the Fishtop Mountain region is a fifth weapons workbench, a fourth armor station, a third, fourth, and fifth cooking station, and our first example of a power armor station hidden away behind the entrance to the Disciples' Lair. Inside Fishtop Mountain in the Overboss headquarters, we have one of each type of crafting station, and on the balcony adding a fourth chemistry station and our third and final power armor station. In the promenade surrounding the market, there are another 2 cooking stations, bringing our number to 7. In the Brad Burton Amphitheater, we have 3 chemistry stations, a cook station, and another armor and weapons workbench. Bringing our final tally to this number I'm too lazy to add to my script, but this number absolutely dwarfs every other settlement on this list. The only issue is that they are spread all over the place and tend to be concentrated in out-of-the-way areas. However, with each crafting station present and each having at least 1 duplicate, this adds 7.5 points to Nuka Town's score. For commercial, we have a junk dealer, a doctor, a chem dealer, which I'm just going to count as a second doctor, and weapons merchant inside the marketplace. There is also a cafe, but there's no dedicated clothing or armor merchant. So for commercial score, Nuka Town ranks 4 out of 6. Finally, for additional amenities, we have the Nuka-cade, a recreational diversion type establishment and the only one of its kind, adding half a point. So Nuka Town gets 0 points for survivability, 1 for security, 7.5 for industry, 4 for commerce, and an additional half point for additional amenities, for a grand total of 13. There's nothing better in the Brad Burton Waste, but maybe there's someplace better on the island. The boundaries of Far Harbor are easier to determine, and the town as a whole is just much smaller, so it's a lot easier to get a handle on where people are living, and more importantly, how they are living. For shelter, there's really only one structure that's for the most part intact, and that's the last plank, the bar and inn, where a sole survivor in need of rest can rent a room. So long as you've got the dough, you can stay indefinitely in a fairly comfortable by Fallout 4 standards environment. The rest of the town, though, all of the shopkeepers, Captain Avery, Mariner, they all live in drafty, in some cases collapsing buildings with entire sections missing, and the refugees at the end of the wharf are just sleeping and living out in the open. So for shelter, it'll get the half point for the sole survivors prospects, but lose the half point for the people that are already living here. Food is also an interesting one. There's a giant pressure cooker that can be seen constantly cooking up whole mirelurks, and there is a fish farm down below at the docks. So despite no agriculture going on, there's definitely an in-universe, fairly sustainable method of feeding the settlement. However, since this isn't Skyrim and the sole survivor just can't jump in and grab a juicy salmon whenever he gets a mite peckish, there's no place for the sole survivor to partake, so once again, half a point. The odd thing is there does not appear to be any evidence of water purification or desalinization going on, so one must wonder if there are any clean sources of water in Far Harbor. In light of a lack of apparent water sources, either for the townies or a dehydrated Nate/Nora, I can't give it the point, leaving a total survival score of 1 out of 3. For security, Far Harbor does better than Nuka World, but only just barely. The main defensive structure for the town is the hull, a collection of scrap together ramparts that can be enhanced to drastically improve the defensibility of the settlement from land. Most of the settlement lies high above the waterline on tall timbers, so it would be very difficult for someone to swim to Far Harbor in order to bypass the hull. But just in case someone tries, there are guard posts built along the water level docks to quickly identify waterborne threats and send them to Davy Jones' locker before they can get to the town. For active security measures, though, there does not appear to be a professional security force, although the denizens of Far Harbor are always ready for a row should the need arise, but no turrets or other forms of active protection means it misses that point as well, so security gets 1 of 2 points. Industrial capacity is also fairly decent at Far Harbor. There is a power armor station outside Mariner's home, weapons and armor at Alan Lee's gun shop, and a chemistry station at the Combination Clinic/General Goods store, and a cooking station just outside the last plank. So Far Harbor gets a perfect 5 out of 5, and they are all easy to find, easily accessible, and quite close together. However, for extra credit opportunities, it doesn't have any duplicate stations, so you're pretty much stuck with one option for any sort of crafting you plan to do. But still, it's 5 out of 5, stop complaining. For commerce, the pickings are pretty good. There's Alan Lee's gun and armor shop, though dedicated vendors for each might be preferable, vendors who aren't Alan Lee. There's the dock in the back of the bait shop, so both junk and medical vendors as well, and there's the last plank for when you want to get silly. There's not a dedicated clothing vendor, and while Alan does sell some armor, it's not much more than any other weapons merchant elsewhere, so I think there's just cause not to classify it as an armor shop and dock the point, leaving Far Harbor with a commerce score of 4 out of 6. So after a quick tally, Far Harbor gets 1 point for survivability, 1 point for security, 5 for industry, 4 for commerce, and with no additional amenities, clocks in with a smooth 11 points. Not enough to knock Nuketown out of our top spot, but this guide is quite young and there are many more towns to contend with. A quick jaunt from Far Harbor up at the top of Cadillac Mountain, we find the synth refuge of Acadia, built in a mostly intact observatory. Although much of the dome has rusted away, most of the internal space is heavy concrete, so while it's not the cheeriest place, there's not much in the way of creature comforts, and there's pretty much no privacy to speak of, the shelter afforded to the synths in Acadia is actually among the best in Fallout 4 in terms of protection from the elements. It'll get the full point for that, although the sole survivor, much like the rest of the people, can't really expect much in the way of privacy. A grungy old mattress in the bowels of Acadia is pretty much the best you should expect. For food, there is a small aeroponics arrangement with some food crops, but this is not nearly enough to support the synths here, unless you believe Max Loken's obviously false statements that synths don't need to eat. And the fact that these plants don't reset ever also means the sole survivor can't really depend on this meager crop as reliable food source either. So in the absence of any other crops in the area, coupled with a once again absence of water pumping or treatment setup, means that a total survival score of 1 is once again all that can be mustered. Security is an interesting one. The outer campus of the observatory is arranged much like a castle. There are multiple tiers of junk fences or natural rock formations which can serve as impassable barriers, allowing for a defense in-depth approach, and the observatory itself can funnel attackers into narrow corridors, where attackers have no place to hide. The outer defenses aren't perfect, as there are a few spots that a person can Bethesda hop to get around, but I think it's negligible enough to give it the point. And even excluding the outer defenses entirely, Acadia proper is still a fortress. Acadia, like most others, doesn't have a professional security force, turrets, or any real form of active defense, unless you consider Chase, a former courser who does not have an official job posting at the settlement, but does have combat skills and experience. So long as she's around, there is a possibility that she could eventually train a security force, or at least provide a detailed and comprehensive defense plan to the settlers, so they know what to do in the event of an attack. I don't know if it's enough to give it the point, maybe half a point. Sure, I'll give security a 1.5 out of 2 just because. It's my list and I do what I want! For industrial capacity, Degen's weapons shop has a weapons and armor workbench. Astor's medical bay has a chemistry station, however there is not a single food cooking station or power armor repair base, so industrially, Acadia is lagging behind most of the other settlements with only a 3 out of 5, and no extra credit for duplicates. Commercial enterprise is a similar story to most we've seen. Degen is a generic weapons merchant, Cog is a junk vendor, Aster tries her best to serve as doctor and chems merchant, and wait, there isn't even a bar? Lame. So very, very lame. Commercially, Acadia is a 3 out of 6. For additional amenities, there's really nothing here you can't find somewhere else unless you count the gigantic array of computers, data terminals, and storage arrays. As you find Acadia, all this equipment is currently in use by a certain synth, but depending on what goes down, that use case may no longer be relevant, allowing all that computing power and storage capacity to be freed up for other purposes. Digitizing soggy old books before the fog finally claims the knowledge within, there's a lot of possible benefits, even just down to the sheer heat that they would give off in the winter months if they could find a way to harness that and move it to the lower levels when needed. So while these computers right now are just cool blinky walls of scrolling text, there is a possibility by the end of the Far Harbor questline that they could serve a valuable purpose that could drastically improve quality of life for Acadia's inhabitants. I'll give them half a point for additional amenities. 1 point for survival, 1.5 for security, 3 for industry, 3 for commerce, and a half-point boost for additional amenities. Acadia totals 9 points, hitting the bottom of this list with an unemphatic thud. Not gonna lie, I'm not even surprised. Rounding out our list of permanent settlements on Mount Desert Island is the Nucleus, the Children of Atom sanctuary in an old submarine repair facility. The Nucleus would be one of the most heavily sheltered locations on this list if it weren't for the fact that this place is bursting with Atom's holy glow. Finding a location here that isn't emitting harmful levels of radiation is a chore, and of all the public beds, there is one single lonely bed where you can sleep without listening to your Pip-Boy clicking all damn night. Despite this one example of the sole survivor being able to find a spot to rest in relative safety, the fact that you're constantly observing rads as you move throughout this place means I'm still docking it the full point for shelter. Not to mention it's just a matter of time before all those shacks just crumble with someone inside them. For food, there are no apparent operations to grow or collect food, and as one might expect, no sources of clean water free of rads. There is an interesting, unique species of glowing mushroom that will actually remove radiation from your body if consumed, but there's no evidence that the children are harvesting and consuming them even as a means of scouring their bodies, a form of penance for those who don't have Atom's blessing. So for survival needs, this place is an absolute nope for all but the most insane soul survivors or, you know, devout children of Atom. For security though, it's tough to beat. The Nucleus is surrounded by a pretty nasty region filled with the island's fog, a radioactive lake, tough rocky terrain, and the facility itself is a bunker designed to withstand direct nuclear strikes, so naturally it's quite defensible. This congregation also makes use of zealots, a full-time security force currently led by a former member of the Enclave, so probably one of the last groups I'd want to tangle with. Many zealots are wearing elements of marine recon armor, so they're very well protected, and the radium rifles they tend to carry are devastating to most humans. So for security at least, the Nucleus gets both points. For industrial capacity, the Nucleus does pretty well. There's an armor workbench behind Sister Mai's shop, a chemistry stand behind the Archimist Clinic, a weapons workbench and power armor station inside Kane's weapon shop. There's also a cook stove in the residential shacks, meaning that the Nucleus gets a perfect 5 out of 5, but without duplicates, there's no extra credit. For commerce, there are 3 shops. There's Mai's General Goods Shack, there's the Archimist who does doctor-adjacent tasks, and there's Kane's weapon shop. Now, Kane does have enough of both weapons and armor in his inventory that I'm inclined to consider his store filling both roles. Atom knows I've bought enough full suits of marine recon armor off him to know. So even though there are only 3 booths, I'm counting 4 of 6 stores present. As far as additional amenities, there's a decontamination chamber which can be either rigged to spray radioactive liquid on you, or as it was originally intended, spray clean water to wash off radioactive debris and give you the coldest, most uncomfortable shower of your life. Speaking from experience. If rigged correctly, that's right, I'm taking sides here, then this would indeed be a unique amenity that would improve quality of life in this radioactive hellhole. Forgive me, division hole. Otherwise, it would just make things even worse. The Nucleus earns a dismal 0 points for survivability, the first full 2-point score for security so far, a perfect 5 points for industry, and 4 points for commerce. The decon station, not sure if I should count it, but I will, giving a total of 11.5 points, just just enough to bump Far Harbor from second place. Now, designing your perfect post-apocalyptic paradise is a lot harder than it looks at first glance, but it's simple to hit the like button on this video if you're enjoying it so far. Viewer engagement is the primary metric I use to determine the sort of content that provides the most value to you, a random person on the internet who is responsible for me releasing my 100th video today. That's right, it's all your fault. Thank you so much, and now on with the Fallout 4 Homeowner's Guide. I debated on whether to include Bunker Hill in this guide. On one hand, it is a very well-established trading community within the Commonwealth. On the other hand, this location can be unlocked as a workshop location, meaning it has already appeared in my settlements ranking video. However, I think it's worth looking at what this place provides for those who never open up the workshop and start plopping down the bare necessities. For survival needs, this is the first, yes, we are 5 entries in and finally found a town that practices farming. Potatoes and corn can be found planted in multiple locations at this site, although Kessler appears to be the only person who actively tends them, meaning she's only going to be able to provide food for 6 people tops. Someone's going to go hungry, and some of those plants are going to wind up dying unless someone else starts chipping in. There is a single hand pump for water and a drinking fountain in what's left of the memorial building, which is so strange that this is the first entry so far where water was even a passing concern. Again, not nearly enough for a town of this size, but at the very least it's something. Everyone lives in dilapidated shacks, one of which serves as a flop house where the sole survivor can rent a bed. Not a place I'd want to sleep personally, but that's what it is. I'll give it the half point for enough food and water to support the sole survivor should they decide to move in, but otherwise this place is deficient in all survival needs. Security is not much better, but it's definitely a better situation overall. The entire settlement is surrounded by a junk fence with only 2 points of entry, so relatively easy to protect them. They are interestingly difficult to approach both at the same time from outside, but are easily both covered from the same point inside, so settlers can concentrate their forces to cover both gates while attackers have to split their forces in order to do the same, so that's kind of interesting. Kessler alone serves as the gate guard, so the unofficial town mayor is also the sole food provider and somehow has to find time to keep watch over the gate. So unlike Chase, who kind of could serve as the basis for a security force at Acadia, it's not likely that Kessler would ever have the time or know-how to perform a similar role, so Bunker Hill will not get any consideration for active security controls, only the point for passive controls. Surprisingly, industrial capacity at Bunker Hill is pretty sparse, and by pretty sparse, I mean it's non-existent. There is not a single crafting station here when you arrive, so I guess that makes this section pretty easy to gauge. There are 3 stores at this location natively: the Flophouse/bar, Deb's Junk Shop, and the Town Vet/Doctor. No weapons, armor, or clothing merchants. But what really makes Bunker Hill stand out is that this is the central trade hub for many local trade caravans, meaning that Trashcan Carla, Doc Weathers, Lucas Miller, and Cricket all stop off here from time to time. So depending on how lucky you are, you could arrive to find armor and weapons vendors here as well, and can have multiple shops to choose from if your goal is to rake in the caps and the locals are already tapped out. Still, the unpredictable nature of traveling caravans means you can't always depend on them being there, so I'll give half a point for each, meaning that Bunker Hill will get 2 points for the traveling caravans and 3 for those that are always here. You want to know something gross? Bunker Hill is the first settlement so far that's apparently given any serious thought into waste management. There is a single communal outhouse, and they even stocked it with newspapers. So thoughtful. Wait, where does the poop go? There's no pipes, there's not even a hole in the floor, and there's stuff being stored down below. Did I say they gave serious thought to it? Scratch that. No. You should be ashamed of yourself, Todd. Is there anywhere a guy can just drop a grumpy in your damn games? Ugh. No points for additional amenities. Final count for Bunker Hill is 1 point survival, 1 for security, 0 for industrial capacity, 5 for commerce, with no additional amenities to speak of, for a total score of 7, making Acadia look better by the second and rocketing into last place. Of the people, for the people. Let's see what the people have to say for Good Neighbor. Good Neighbor is actually not doing very good in terms of survival needs. Many of its residents are sleeping in the street, in cobbled together shacks, or even in buildings that no longer have roofs. But interestingly, unlike most entries we discussed so far, this large number is actually a minority. A higher proportion of the population are actually living inside buildings that either have floors that are completely intact or entire structures that are completely intact, like the Memory Den and Old State House. I guess Hancock's not that bad of a guy if he's willing to share his home and headquarters with the masses. Although the Hotel Rexford is missing most of its upper levels, the lower levels are still surprisingly intact, and they even hire a maid. I think she's going to need a bit more than a broom though. The hotel rooms that can be rented are fairly luxurious by Commonwealth standards, with beds, couches, or if you're a local you might call them a Davino or a Davenport, easy chairs, dressers, pretty much anything you need to feel at home so long as you've got the caps. So despite the disparity in living conditions, the average leans more towards an acceptable level of protection, and on real cold nights or hot days I suppose people could take refuge in the third rail, even if there's no place to really lay down a bedroll. Food and water sadly is not in a good state. It seems the only consumable that's readily available to residents is chems and alcohol. No crops, no hunting operations, no meat herds, and no water pumping operations. It's a wonder these people don't starve or die of dehydration, as try as you might to find it, there is not a single source of running water anywhere in Good Neighbor. The main benefit of living in Good Neighbor though is security. Due to a very lucky placement of a downed section of elevated highway and the mostly intact brick and steel structures that surround Good Neighbor, the rest of the area was easily walled off with whatever junk and scrap could be found. Some areas make better use of welded scrap metal than most other settlements, so the protection afforded is a little less of a liability than say Bunker Hill, where the defenses are almost entirely flammable, dry-rotting lumber and rubber and integrated into everyone's homes. There's a single entrance to Good Neighbor, and the storefronts, low stone walls, and other architectural remains mean that Good Neighbor would be highly defendable and extremely difficult to storm and force. Although it's not exactly what you would consider professional, the Triggermen gang have devoted a large contingent to maintain order and security in Good Neighbor. Most of these Triggermen wield submachine guns, so quite a bit more deadly than most other full-time security forces in the Commonwealth, although they tend to dress in business suits and never wear armor of any sort, so they are a bit of a glass cannon. Still, this is more than enough to warrant a full 2-point score for security. Industrial capacity is nothing to sniff at in Good Neighbor. Cleo's Guns shop has a power armor repair station and a weapons workbench, while next door, Daisy's Discounts has a sewing machine for armor repair and a cook stove she'll let you use. If someone else is already using the stove, don't you fret. In the back end of the main alley between the Hotel Rexford and Old State House is a cinder blocks fire pit you can use, and nearby is a chemistry station. If that one is in use, there's another chemistry station in the basement of the Hotel Rexford, so industrially speaking, Good Neighbor is doing pretty good, a full 5 points for having each of the crafting stations and an additional half point each for the 2 duplicated types of stations. For commerce, Good Neighbor is fairly average. As previously stated, there's Cleo's gun shop and Daisy's Discounts where she sells an assortment of general goods. The third rail serves as a good place to wet your whistle, but Whitechapel Charlie only sells booze, no food items, so he'll only get half a point. The Hotel Rexford has a chem dealer or two holding up the wall, but without an audience to Adam Doctor, I'm inclined to only render half a point in that category as well. There are no armor and clothing merchants either, so all in all, a commerce score of 3 out of 6 is all Good Neighbor can really muster. Additional amenities is kind of an interesting thing. There's the Memory Den, which serves a couple purposes. First, it's a novel form of vice and recreation, allowing individuals with heavy purse to relive their favorite memories in a virtual reality simulator, and there's even a radio station in the back offering an alternative to Diamond City Radio for people that are more into audiobooks than the top 40 hits of the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. There's also a single outhouse, jury-rigged over a manhole in the street. Hey, if it works, it works. At least it makes a lot more sense than whatever Bunker Hill thought was a good idea. Still, that's a single working toilet for the entire population of Good Neighbor. But hey, you've got to start somewhere. I'll consider it an extra at this point. In total, Good Neighbor is more than a just alright neighbor. Heck, you might even call it a great neighbor. With 1 point for survivability, 2 for security, 6 for industry, and 3 for stores, with 1.5 for additional amenities, 13.5 points finally knocks Nuketown, USA out of the number 1 spot. But can it hope to keep its position as top dog in the Commonwealth and beyond? Now for the big kahuna, the Great Bambino, Diamond City. Built in the mostly intact remains of Fenway Park, Diamond City is a concrete and steel Goliath towering over the rubble-filled streets that surround it. For survivability, Diamond City easily has the most going on for it so far. It's the only town with what appears to be an adequate water system. There is no running water throughout much of its residential and commercial center, but there does appear to be the start of a water distribution system that feeds the agricultural region and pipes that can be seen running pretty much every everywhere. It just doesn't appear to be terminating in any of the homes just yet. This is fed by a large depression which collects enough rainwater that a purification plant is viable. For food, Diamond City possesses a robust public garden consisting of mute fruit trees and tato plants, as well as a Brahmin herd. In total, I counted 41 tato plants and 22 mute fruit trees, which would be able to provide enough food for about 42 settlers and some change. So a rather adequate food supply, but not quite enough for the total number of settlers. But paired with the Brahmin herd and due to their central location in the Commonwealth and regionally famous market, outside caravans are likely able to supplement their food supply as needed. And let's face it, this is easily the largest agricultural operation in the entire Commonwealth when the sole survivor arrives on the scene, so I think I have to give it the whole point for food. Shelter gets a bit trickier. Most people live in cobbled together shacks and shanties, which realistically would turn into ovens in the summer and freezers in the winter. Some of these are better constructed than others with cinder block walls and such, and there does appear to be some sort of fans visible on the exterior walls of most structures, which could be basic climate control systems. But these aren't visible from the interiors of any structures, so I'm unsure if these are truly for that purpose or they're just additional eye candy. Easily the most sturdy construction of any of these shacks is Home Plate, a mostly cinder block construction that can be purchased as a full-time residence for those that don't want to spend a nightly rent at the Dugout Inn. Naturally, you're going to have to spruce the place up if you don't want to live in a junk-filled warehouse, but all things considered, it's okay by Diamond City standards. This is enough for me to grudgingly net Diamond City a complete survival score of 3, but only just barely in each category. Security is also very good. The majority of standing structure being intact concrete or massive steel gates, access to Diamond City is restricted to a single entry point. That entry is defensible to an extent, but if an enemy force were to get to the top of the staircase, they now have the high ground. And you know what they say when they have the high ground. Oh yes you do, don't deny it. For active security controls, Diamond City Security maintains a full-time security force, armed with only pipe weapons and equipped with old baseball gear they found lying around, but still it's better than nothing, and it is a very sizable security force, so they do have numbers on their side. They employ a defense in-depth strategy with constant patrols both inside and outside their walls, and a number of automated turrets outside can provide ample warning of attacks and allow security to concentrate on the main entrance to Diamond City. This easily nets them a full 2 points for security. Industrial capacity is also very good in Diamond City. The Market Square has a publicly available crafting station of each type. The Science Center has an additional cinderblock fire pit, a chemistry station, weapons workbench, and armor crafting station. There's nothing else throughout the area, but Diamond City gets a full 5 points for an industry, plus 2 points for almost rounding out each category with a duplicate, just missing that extra power armor repair bay. Commercial expertise is easily Diamond City's strong suit. There are 2 bars, the Dugout Inn and Colonial Tap House, Choice Chops, a butcher, and Power Noodles, a noodle shop. Figured that was self-explanatory, but some people complain when I don't explain everything. In any event, food and drink I think are definitely covered. For medicine, there is a dedicated doctor and a chem dealer, so medicine is a check. For a dedicated clothing merchant, there's Fallon's Basement. Arturo at Commonwealth Weaponry and Mo Cronin at Swatters both got weapons covered, and thanks to a working Mr. Handy, Diamond City Surplus has all the junk you could ask for 24 hours a day. Honestly, the only thing they're missing is a dedicated armor merchant, which Arturo can sometimes get some armor in, but his stock is too limited to consider it a readily available resource. So all things considered, the market here is very good, but not quite perfect, earning 5 out of 6 points. Additional amenities are also good. There's a full-time barber at the Super Salon, there's Doc Crocker, the Commonwealth's only facial surgeon, as long as you're not picky about sanitation, a dedicated schoolhouse, there's the headquarters and broadcast station for Diamond City Radio in case you wish to make a request, there's an outdoor stage area for live performances or public addresses by Chubbs McDonough, even a playground for the kiddos. You know what there isn't? A single working toilet. Now I know why they're piling pallets in the street to keep off the ground. That ain't dirt. Anyway, I'm sure there are more amenities I'm forgetting to discuss, but we've already reached our 2-point maximum, so let's rack them up. Diamond City just barely eked out a perfect 3 points for survivability, a strong 2 points for security, a better than perfect 7 points for industrial capacity, 5 points for commercial enterprise, and 2 points for additional amenities, earning Diamond City a stellar 19 points, slamming through good neighbor like Power Armor on the Pain Train to seize the #1 space in this guide. Now you might be forgiven for thinking that it can't possibly get any better than this. There's no place that can contend with Diamond City. You might even be right, but there's one place left for us to explore, and it ain't no slouch. But can it dethrone Diamond City as the jewel of the Commonwealth? It's easy to miss, not a lot of people know it's there, but Vault 81 very well could be the safest place to live in the entire Commonwealth. For survival needs, there seems to be more going on than what meets the eye. For water, I can't actually find any equipment rocking around that looks like water pumps, but there are pristine-looking sinks and toilets, that's right, toilets that still look to be in service. There are also 3 working drinking fountains spread throughout the vault, so if we assume these offer roughly the same amount of water as a hand pump, supporting about 3 settlers each, this is still quite insufficient for the vault's population. So while it's not as overtly visible as all the piping and plumbing from surface water in Diamond City, I think it's reasonable enough to assume it's just all hidden behind bulkheads somewhere. Oh, calm down. I saw you getting ready to type grumpily. That's right, I see everything. For food, the crop appears to produce a decent mix of foodstuffs, with 3 melons, 9 corn, and 12 carrots. This gives the dwellers a fairly varied diet compared to most subsistence farmers throughout the Commonwealth, but the planters found here would seem to suggest only being able to support about 12 dwellers, far below the amount that we see. But a conversation that can be overheard in the vault diner suggests that somewhere there is a turnip crop that is currently the only thing ready to harvest. Paired with the fact that fresh fruit and veggies are laying around all over the place, and Dr. Penske does have a special strain of mute fruit she's working on developing and provides the sole survivor some fruit to taste test, these would seem to suggest a test crop somewhere. I mean, I can find no evidence of a second lab or grow room anywhere, so this is a bit strange, but for now let's just assume there are some areas of the vault that the sole survivor is not allowed into, and I do have it on good authority that a massive increase in the vault's usable square footage is more than mere possibilities, so this could be expanded on. Shelter naturally is the best out there. Being underground, this is the only permanent settlement in the Commonwealth that doesn't have anything to fear from the rad storms that blow in from the glowing sea, although Far Harbor and Acadia do use fog condensers that can mitigate that exposure as well. No drafts or rapid temperature swings are to be expected either, as deep below the earth, a fairly consistent temperature can be expected, and climate control systems can do all the rest. Naturally, every vaultee gets a bed with sheets and a blanket and a pillow, and presumably isn't packed with 210 years of greasy mole rat farts. There's absolutely no contest when it comes to shelter. If a filthy surfy,
not call them surfies,
manages to become a full-fledged member of the vault, they will get a place of honor. Okay, it's really just a warehouse that's been cleared out, but it's more centrally located instead of being located all the way back in the residential wing, complete with all the necessities, and even a bobblehead display rack. So in the meantime, despite a lack of visual confirmation of some elements, there's enough here to suggest that survivability does get a perfect score of 3. Security is also a strength that Vault 81 excels at. Being underground, this is the only major settlement that is not only immune from attacks from the ground, but also the air, as all of the defensive perimeters mentioned at other sites could be defeated by airborne forces. Like most vaults, it has a single point of entry, one that can be locked down from the inside, even preventing outsiders from opening it, and with a security force under orders to do so, making this place basically impregnable. Just in case attackers are planning on trying to wait the dwellers out or to try and plant explosives on the door that's rated to withstand a direct blast from a nuke, there are automated turrets at the entrance waiting to burn a hole or two in that notion. Vault 81 employs a full-time security force that defense-wise isn't much better than Diamond City security wearing riot gear, not really rated to stopping small arms fire, but can probably shrug off a pool cue or two. But offensively, every member wields a 10mm pistol, better than the pipe weapons used by Diamond City security, but not nearly as deadly as the radium rifles carried by the Children of Adam zealots. Still, it's enough to drive off most raiders, lower-ranking gunners, and even Institute synths should the need arise, which realistically would be the only real threat if the vault were to go into lockdown. So for security, if we gave Diamond City and Good Neighbor a full 12 points, I'm sure we can agree that Vault 81 deserves it as well. Industrial capacity is where Vault 81 falls flat on its face. For a place that has to fabricate most of their tools and parts themselves, you would think that there would be workbenches all over the place, or at least a dedicated workshop. But surprisingly, there is not a single crafting station anywhere in Vault 81. There is a fire pit just south of the entrance to the cave if you're willing to risk going above ground to cook your dinner, but since that lies well outside the defined boundaries of the settlement, I'm not even going to count that one. Industrial capacity gets an absolute score of 0. At least Bunker Hill lets you add some if you aren't above using the workshop. Commerce is also less than what you'd expect for a vault that has been open to establishing trade with outsiders for decades. There is a general goods depot that will trade in junk, the diner, which is more of a farmer's market dealing in fresh veggies, and a clinic with 2 doctors on duty, the supervising doctor who primarily focuses on proactive research and preventative medicine, and a junior doctor who fixes up most boo-boos and trades in medical supplies. But that's really it. There are no dedicated clothing, armor, or weapons merchants, though that's sort of to be expected from a vault that isn't numbered 34, and while there's no bar or other means of getting liquored up, that's also understandable considering the civic-minded approach to population management in the vault. Can't have people propping up a bar stool instead of cleaning out the air filter for the water chip that's about to overheat and burn out. Still, understandable or not, I can't give commerce ranking a greater than 3 out of 6. Additional amenities are similar to Diamond City, but not to the same degree. There is a dedicated classroom and teacher for educating the youth at the vault. There is also a full-time barber. Most notably, there are several flushing toilets, not outhouses, genuine working flushing toilets throughout the vault, enough that you could reasonably expect them to support the whole vault. It's so tragic that what we in the developed world consider a basic need is considered a luxury in the Commonwealth and beyond, but it is. There is a bobblehead rack in the sole survivor's quarters, and though that's only available to a single individual, that's what really sets Vault 81 apart. It's the little things, the clinic that actually maintains a sterile operating room, the beds that have clean sheets and pillows, the ability for individuals in the vault to pursue hobbies like bobblehead collecting, and a shower, yes, a shower, an apparently working way of cleaning yourself. Although weirdly, there's only one and it's in the overseer's private bathroom, so again, not a public resource. Still, this is a damn sight better than anything you could find in Good Neighbor or Diamond City. For additional amenities, I'm gonna give Vault 81 the full 2-point maximum in wrap-up. So survival needs gets a questionable 3, security gets the strongest 2 of the lot, industrial capacity is non-existent, commerce only gets 3 points, and additional amenities adds 2 for a grand total of only 10, sliding in just above Acadia, leaving Diamond City the uncontested best place to live in the Commonwealth, and it's not even a close race. And if you don't plan on swinging a hammer to make it a better place, avoid Bunker Hill like it's sprouting blue boils. I'm curious if you would rank these settlements differently. I know I can trust you to let me know if there's anything I left out, or as is my favorite thing to see in the comments, anything started with the words "you forgot." But before you do that, I did want to salute my patrons that help keep the lights on at Gray Gaming. Special thanks to my officer tier patron Carver050, and continued thanks to all my non-coms who keep the grunts on point. Patreon funds go directly toward improving the production quality of my videos, from music stools so I can play these music tracks that are definitely not a divisive issue at all, to maybe one day paying for better editing software that can allow me to edit one of these videos faster with less buffering time between clips than it takes to grow a potato crop from seeds. Patrons get access to exclusive channels on my Discord server like behind the scenes stuff and access to my videos as soon as YouTube says they're safe and won't hurt copyright's feelings, whoever that is, but they sure are sensitive. Until my next salute, stand at ease. I'm sure you've already left it in the comments, but I didn't forget the Institute. I just consider it to be more of a faction headquarters than a town or city, so it got left out along with the Railroad HQ and the Pridwin. But if you'd like a video ranking faction headquarters using a similar ranking system, or even just using this same one, I'll be happy to oblige. I might even turn this series on Fallout 3 or New Vegas if you express enough interest. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Until next time, stay safe, and I hope to see you here on the start of Gray's 2nd century at Gray Gaming. Ugh, Gray Galaxies really has some catch up to do. If you're into sci-fi stuff, you might find some of that content interesting, although most of it's just me whining about Star Wars, but I like to think it's got some good stuff in it too.